I never ever fathomed that, it's a dream and a goal. I knew I had a lot of gas left in the tank at that point. I've got to make a certain amount of years or a certain amount of time. I just kept playing. There's lots of studs on this list, like all these guys deserve. How do you distinguish this guy versus this guy? I mean, there's so many great players in that. So there are nights when I still see the football resting in the snow before I see the stadium, the crowd, or the scoreboard. Strange, isn't it? People remember the kick. They remember the ball turning through the air and the clock reaching zero. But how often do they remember the men who carried us close enough for that kick to matter? For nearly 25 years, I stood at the end of drives built by other people. I watched defenders drag themselves up after one more collision. I watched receivers run routes when their legs were already gone. I watched quarterbacks walk into huddles with millions of people waiting for them to fail. Then only after all of that, my name was called. I played beside two of the greatest quarterbacks the game has ever known. I shared locker rooms with men who could change a season with one throw, one rush, or one moment of courage. Some led with their voices, others barely needed to speak. But when the noise is gone, who do I remember most? Who made pressure feel smaller? And which 5 players truly shaped the career everyone now associates with a single foot? These are the 5 greatest players I ever stood beside, and why only one could be number 1. Number 5, Willie McGinest. I first met Willie McGinest when New England was still trying to understand what kind of football team it wanted to become. There were no championship banners above us. Nobody walked into that locker room expecting history. We were simply a group of men trying to survive another season. But Willie already carried himself differently. He was not constantly giving speeches. He did not need to remind people that he was one of the strongest men in the room. I noticed the way other players watched him. When Willie became serious, everyone else became quiet. When he remained calm, the rest of us felt there was still a way forward. That was the quality I remember most, his calmness. Have you ever stood beside someone who made a difficult moment feel smaller without saying very much? Willie could do that. I understood it completely during Super Bowl 36. The St. Louis Rams were not an ordinary opponent. Their offense played with a speed that could make a defense feel late before the ball was even snapped. Kurt Warner had weapons everywhere. Marshall Faulk could hurt you as a runner or a receiver. Every time they lined up, it felt as if one mistake could change the game. From the sideline, I watched Willie move between his teammates. He was checking positions, talking to the younger defenders, and reminding them to stay disciplined. The Rams kept coming. Our defense forced turnovers. They delivered hits. They made St. Louis fight for every yard. Yet late in the game, the Rams still came back and tied the score. That was the moment when fear could have entered our sideline. We had watched an early lead disappear. The most dangerous offense in football had found its rhythm. Many teams would have started looking at the clock and wondering how the story was about to slip away. I looked toward Willie. He was not celebrating. He was not complaining. He was preparing for whatever came next. That image stayed with me. Tom Brady then led the final drive. The offense moved us into range. I stepped onto the field with the score tied and only seconds remaining. People remember what happened next. They remember the snap, the hold, and the ball traveling through the uprights as time expired. But what they do not always remember is everything that had to happen before I was allowed to take that kick. Willie and that defense had spent the entire evening keeping us alive. Every collision, every adjustment, and every moment of discipline had carried us toward those final seconds. Looking back now, I have to admit something. My name became connected to that victory because I scored the final 3 points, but Willie McGinest was one of the men who made those 3 points possible. He taught me that leadership does not always need to be heard. Sometimes it is simply the calm face you search for when the game begins to fall apart. That is why Willie McGinest is my number 5. Number 4, Dwight Freeney. Before Dwight Freeney became my teammate, he was one of those players I preferred watching from a safe distance. When I was in New England, every game against Indianapolis came with the same warning. Do not let Peyton Manning control the rhythm. Do not give their offense an extra possession. And when our own offense had the ball, never forget where Dwight was standing. I had seen his speed on film. But film does not show you everything. After I joined the Colts, I stood near the practice field one afternoon and watched him explode off the line. That first step was so sudden that for a moment the offensive tackle seemed to be moving after Dwight had already gone. I remember thinking, so this is what they were talking about. The quality that separated Dwight was not simply speed, it was anticipation. He made people nervous before the play began. A quarterback could know where Dwight was, point him out, and change the protection, yet still feel him coming. How many defenders can influence a play before they even touch anyone? Dwight could. The memory I returned to most came during the AFC Championship game after the 2006 season. It was Indianapolis against New England, and I was standing on the opposite sideline from the team I had spent 10 years with. That felt strange enough. Then the Patriots built a 21-3 lead, and the entire stadium seemed to recognize an old story. New England had done this before. They knew how to close these games. Indianapolis had spent years trying to get past them. From our sideline, you could feel doubt trying to enter, but the game did not turn in one dramatic moment. It changed slowly. One possession, one stop, one small reason to keep believing. Dwight kept rushing. Even when he did not reach Tom Brady, he forced the pocket to become uncomfortable. He made the timing less clean. He reminded our defense that one play could still give the offense another chance. The score began to tighten. I watched Peyton bring us back, but I also watched Dwight and the defense return to the field knowing that one mistake could end everything. Late in the fourth quarter, New England had the ball with an opportunity to answer. Nobody on our sideline was relaxed. I certainly was not. When the final interception came, the sound inside the stadium changed. It was not just celebration, it was relief. Indianapolis had finally crossed a barrier that had stood in front of the franchise for years. Looking back, I have to admit that Dwight changed the way I understood defensive greatness. A kicker usually notices the player who finishes the play. Dwight taught me to notice the man who disrupts it before it can develop. He could alter a quarterback's thinking without recording a statistic. He could make an entire offense hurry simply because everyone knew he was coming. That is why Dwight Freeney is my number 4. He made opponents feel pressure, but the next man gave his teammates something just as valuable. He gave them certainty. Number 3, Reggie Wayne. I knew Reggie Wayne before I ever really knew him. During my years in New England, I saw him across the field in those games against Indianapolis. Most of the attention followed Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison. That was understandable. But every time I watched the film, Reggie seemed to be exactly where he was supposed to be. Then I joined the Colts, and I began seeing the smaller things. He did not waste much movement. He did not need to turn every practice into a performance. He would run his route, catch the ball, return to the huddle, and do it again. There was something almost ordinary about the way he worked, until you realized how rarely he made an ordinary mistake. That was Reggie's greatest quality. Reliability. In football, everyone talks about talent. But when the game becomes tight, what do players truly search for? They search for someone whose habits do not change simply because the pressure has changed. Reggie was that person. I remember Super Bowl 41 in Miami. The rain never seemed to stop. The ball felt different. The field looked different. Even simple movements required more attention than usual. Then, Devin Hester returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown. Just like that, Chicago had the lead, and the night had become uncomfortable before our offense had even taken the field. We had waited so long to reach that game, and within seconds we were chasing it. A little later, Peyton dropped back and found Reggie deep down the field. For a moment, Reggie looked almost alone in the rain. He caught the ball and kept running toward the end zone. 53 yards, touchdown. I can still remember what changed on our sideline. It was not wild celebration. Not yet. It was relief. That play reminded us that we did not have to defeat Chicago all at once. We only had to settle down and return to being ourselves. Reggie had found the open space, Peyton had trusted him, and suddenly the strange beginning no longer felt so dangerous. The rest of the night was not easy. The rain continued. Possessions became messy. There were moments when the football seemed determined to slip out of somebody's hands. But Reggie remained Reggie. That may sound simple, but it mattered. He never allowed the weather, the stage, or the score to change the way he carried himself. When he returned to the huddle, you could almost feel the offense become more certain. Looking back now, I have to admit that Reggie changed the way I thought about greatness. It does not always announce itself. Sometimes greatness is simply being where your teammates expect you to be, especially when everything around them has become uncertain. As a kicker, I understood that feeling. The team trusted me to make the same motion no matter how loud the stadium became. Reggie lived by that same kind of trust on every route. That is why Reggie Wayne is my number 3. He was the man Peyton could always find. And that brings me to the quarterback who seemed to know where everyone would be before the rest of us did. Number 2, Peyton Manning. I spent years trying to beat Peyton Manning before I ever stood beside him. In New England, preparing for Indianapolis always felt different. Peyton would walk toward the line, study the defense, and begin changing things. A word, a gesture, one step to the side. Then everyone around him seemed to understand something the rest of us had not seen yet. From the opposite sideline, it could be irritating. After I joined the Colts, I finally understood where it came from. Peyton did not arrive at those answers by accident. He prepared for every possibility he could imagine. He studied until a defensive movement that looked ordinary to me became a warning to him. Even during practice, he wanted every detail to be right. That was the quality that stayed with me. Preparation. People sometimes describe great quarterbacks as if they simply walk onto the field and feel what to do. But how often does confidence really come from instinct alone? With Peyton, confidence came from work nobody in the stadium ever saw. The game I remember most was the AFC Championship after the 2006 season. New England led us 21-3. I had spent 10 years with the Patriots, so I knew what that lead meant. They understood how to make a desperate team become impatient. They waited for you to believe the game had to be recovered in one possession. Standing on the Indianapolis sideline, I could feel that danger. The stadium had become quieter. Our season seemed to be slipping toward the same ending the Colts had suffered before. And across the field stood men I knew well, men who could sense uncertainty almost immediately. Peyton did not try to erase 18 points with one throw. That is what I remember. He returned to the huddle and kept working. A completion here, a first down there. The offense began moving. The crowd began returning. Slowly, the game stopped feeling like a Patriots victory and started feeling unfinished. By the fourth quarter, every possession carried the weight of an entire season. When Indianapolis finally took the lead late, there was still time left. Nobody celebrated as though it were over. We had seen Tom Brady in those situations too many times. I stood on the sideline and watched the final New England drive. I could not kick. I could not defend. All I could do was wait. Then the interception came. For a second, I did not know what to feel. Relief came first, then joy. Then the strange realization that I had just reached the Super Bowl by defeating the team with whom I had won 3 of them. Peyton had carried Indianapolis through the barrier it had been chasing for years. Looking back now, I have to admit that he changed the way I understood pressure. He showed me that calmness on Sunday is often built during quiet hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. He was not guessing when the moment arrived. He had already lived through it in his preparation. That is why Peyton Manning is my number 2. And honestly, placing him here is not easy. But the man at number 1 shared the earliest, coldest, and most defining moments of my career. Peyton taught me how preparation creates belief. The next man made me believe there was always enough time left. Number 1, Tom Brady. The first time I really noticed Tom Brady, he did not look like the man people would one day call the greatest quarterback of all time. He was young, quiet, still trying to earn his place. There were other players with stronger arms and bigger reputations. Tom did not walk into the room demanding attention. But when his opportunity came, something about him changed the atmosphere. He did not seem frightened by being unprepared for fame. That was the quality I remember most. Calmness, not the kind that comes from believing nothing can go wrong. Tom understood that things could go wrong. He simply refused to let one bad play decide what happened next. Have you ever stood beside someone who made the clock feel slower? Tom could do that. I think about Super Bowl 36. The Rams had tied the game late. We had 1 minute and 21 seconds remaining. No timeouts. Most people expected us to protect the ball and play for overtime. Honestly, part of me understood that thinking. We were not supposed to be there. Street Lewis had the experienced quarterback, the explosive offense, and the reputation. Tom was still a young player carrying an entire season into the final minute of the biggest game of his life. But when he entered the huddle, he did not look like a man waiting for overtime. He completed a pass. Then another. The chains moved. The clock kept falling. I stood on the sideline watching the field slowly become smaller. Every completion brought us a little closer, but there was no guarantee we would reach kicking range. One mistake and the opportunity would disappear. Tom never rushed the moment. That is what I remember now. Not shouting, not panic, just one decision after another. Finally, the offense reached the Rams' 30-yard line. My turn came. I walked onto the field for a 48-yard attempt. People often ask what I felt. The truth is there was no room to feel very much. The snap came. The hold went down. I swung my leg. The ball went through as time expired. For years, that image followed me. The kick, the celebration, my teammates running onto the field. But the older I get, the more I think about the minute before it. Without Tom, I'd never walk onto that field. That is why he is number one. Willie McGinest gave our team its foundation. Dwight Freeney showed me how one defender could disturb an entire offense. Reggie Wayne taught me what reliability looked like. Peyton Manning showed me how preparation created confidence. Tom gave me the moments that defined my life. He did not make my kicks for me. He did something just as important. He kept finding a way to place the game in my hands. We were young when it began. We did not know a dynasty was being born. We were simply trying to win the next play. Looking back now, I can admit it. Tom Brady is number one because when the game was nearly gone, he made all of us believe there was still enough time left. When people ask me about the greatest players I ever stood beside, they usually expect a debate about numbers, records, or championships. I understand that. Football gives us plenty of ways to measure a career, but after all these years, those are not the first things I remember. I remember Willie McGinest standing calmly while the rest of us were still learning how to win. I remember Dwight Freeney exploding off the line and making an offense uncomfortable before the play had truly begun. I remember Reggie Wayne running through the rain as though nothing around him had changed. I remember Peyton Manning preparing for moments days before they arrived. And I remember Tom Brady looking at a disappearing clock as if it were simply another problem waiting to be solved. Each man gave me something different. Willie gave me a foundation. Dwight showed me the power of pressure. Reggie showed me what trust looked like. Peyton taught me that confidence is built long before game day. Tom taught me never to assume the moment was over. Maybe that is why I still think about the football resting in the snow. People see a kicker standing alone. They see one man, one ball, and two goalposts. It looks like the loneliest job on the field. But is any kick truly taken alone? Before the snap, someone had to protect the quarterback. Someone had to catch the pass. Someone had to make the tackle. Someone had to keep believing when the score suggested otherwise. Then at the very end, I was allowed to step onto the field. My name may be attached to some of those final moments. I am grateful for that, but the older I get, the more clearly I understand the truth. I did not create those moments by myself. I was simply the last man to touch the ball after great players had carried us close enough to history.